Breaking news in the case of California versus Kellen Winslow II, the NFL star accused of rape. That's right, a jury has been selected. Opening statement scheduled for 9 a.m. A jury of 9 men and 3 women have been selected right now, happening right this moment in the courtroom. Alternates are being selected. Alternates, folks, are like understudies. If one of the main jurors can't make it to court, then you fill in with an alternate. And 4 alternates are scheduled to be selected. That is happening right now. Our Court TV team is inside the courtroom. They will bring us any more breaking news when we have the full jury, the 12 plus the 4, all of them selected. We will let you know. But right now, opening statements are scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday morning. During this entire process, the courtroom was packed. Live in front of the San Diego courthouse, defense attorney Brian Claypool. Brian, such a pleasure to have you joining us today.
Great to be with you. It's a frenzy around here for sure, I'll tell you that.
Well, Brian, please enlighten us. I want to hear about the frenzy. Is it all about Winslow II?
Well, look, here's how I see it. As I understand, there's 9 men on the jury. If I'm the defense lawyer for Winslow, I'm happy with that. Because going into this, he needs to have more men. Why? Because, let's face it, Winslow has to be humanized in this trial because there are so many serious allegations against him. And having men who, for example, might have been interested in sports or are sports fanatics, who might be familiar with the legacy of Kellen's father and the success that both had in the NFL, I mean, that's going to play a part in this case. So to have the 9 men on the jury, I think, is very favorable to Kellen Winslow. So they did a good job, I think, in jury selection.
Brian Claypool, you're a mind reader, because that's exactly where I was going with my question. Thank you, sir. Now, I'd like to know what you think about only 3 women on the jury. Is that going to hurt or help Kellen Winslow II?
That is going to help Kellen Winslow. I'm a little surprised that the prosecutor didn't do a better job of getting more women on the jury. Because if I'm the prosecutor in this case, I'm doing everything in my power to get women on the jury, because you need women to step into the shoes of the victims in this case. I'm not saying that a man can't do that. Yeah, I'm a man. But let's face it, I think men are a little bit more resistant to do that because they are men versus women who can really understand, for example, why it wasn't reported immediately, the lack of any physical or corroborating evidence. Women might look at this and say, well, hey, wait a minute. I don't think I need to have an eyewitness or any physical evidence or DNA evidence. I know there's DNA for one of the victims, but a woman might be able to overlook the lack of corroborating evidence. And let's face it, in a sex assault criminal trial, it's not an easy case to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. You need to have some corroborating evidence. The he said, the she said, you've got DNA on one of those. But even the DNA isn't going to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, because the defense lawyers could argue, well, wait a minute, it's consensual. So what? The DNA is irrelevant. So if you don't have much other physical evidence, DNA evidence, eyewitnesses, you need women then on the jury to really relate to what these victims went through.
Brian Claypool, I'm a woman. I'm a woman, and I'm telling you, women are harder on other women, and I'll tell you why, Brian Claypool, because I would be sitting there saying, I would do this, and I would do that, and she didn't do this, and she didn't do that. And that is why I am concerned for the prosecution, or I'm sorry, I'm concerned that these women are going to judge the Jane Does harsher.
Yeah, so I think we differ on that. Now, and I'll give you a good example. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I conducted 2 high-profile jury trials for Dalia DiPolito and in West Palm Beach, Florida. Remember, that's the case where it was a murder for hire.
I remember, yes. Yes.
Saying, she said, I'm 5,000% sure I want my husband killed. Well, guess what? I nearly won the first trial. The first trial I did was the retrial, and I nearly won that case. Why? We had quite a few women on that jury. Believe it or not, the 5 jurors, we had 3 jurors in our favor, and the 2 alternates were in our favor. 4 of those 5 jurors that voted to acquit Dahlia in the second trial were women. They were relating to what Dahlia was going through, the domestic abuse aspect of it, the being coerced by law enforcement in that case to create good TV for the cop show. We were successful in that case because we had women on that jury who really could better understand what Dahlia was going through. Ironically, in that case, Seema, in that case, the 4-person, we could have had an acquittal in that case. The 4-person convinced 2 other jurors to go against us. What was he? An older white guy. So go figure. It'll be interesting to see what happens here.
It will certainly be interesting. Brian, let me ask you, do you know the district attorney Owens? Do you know anything about him? And can you share with us?
Yeah, I know a little bit about him. Good, like your guest said, good reputation, very aggressive. But let's face it. This case is being prosecuted, in part. I mean, I know there's some serious allegations, but this is a high-profile case, and prosecutors like to take cases that A, they can win, and B, I'm not saying this prosecutor's doing it, but most prosecutors like to build up a pedigree, a good resume that might take he or she to some higher political level. So this case, there's a lot at stake. And another thing I wanted to mention is I'm not so sure that having all 5 victims in this case as well, tried in one case like the prosecutor wanted, is a good thing for the prosecutor. I think this played right into the theme of defense lawyers for Winslow, which is, hey, look at this guy, successful football player, his dad was a legend, he's a high-profile celebrity, and look at them ganging up on this guy. They're going to bring in now 5 women to come after him, and there's varying degree of charges against him. It gives the perception to the jury that they are ganging up on him, number one. Number two, I think the most important point that we should be talking about is
and Brian,
there's a possibility here of...
Brian, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to ask you to stick around, and there's about 1 million more questions I have for you, Brian Claypool. Okay, more on the jury selection that is happening right now in the case of NFL star Kellen Winslow after the break. Brian, I'm going to go to you first because we were just having a conversation about why you believe that putting so many Jane Does together, Jane Doe 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 different incidents, 5 different women, why putting them all together in this trial is a problem for the prosecution as opposed to a strength.
Yeah. Yeah, this could be a colossal disaster for the prosecution, and here's why. It's what I call potential cross-contamination. What I mean by that is you're now going to have 5 victims coming in to testify instead of, for example, if the prosecution had picked the case, which I would have done, which was the 17-year-old that was allegedly raped who's now 33. I would have just handled that case first. Now imagine if she gets up and testifies very effectively, believable, she has a good memory, and then you bring in, for example, another Jane Doe who can't even identify Kellen Winslow as the perpetrator that happened in the preliminary hearing with one of the Jane Doe victims. Or you have another victim that comes up and then just completely has a memory lapse or can't really explain what happened. The potential then exists that the jury's back there hearing 2 or 3 of the victims not testifying in an effective manner, and then that filters in and potentially contaminates their mind as to how they adjudicate a stronger victim. So it might dilute the case in general for some of these victims.
Brian, I completely understand that, but my confusion is why you would think that, okay, so number one, I agree. Jane Doe number 4, the case from 2003, should absolutely have been separate from the other 4 Jane Does because of its remoteness, because of the timeline, because of Kellen Winslow's age as well as the victim's age. There's so many reasons I think the prosecution and the defense would have been better off if that was separate. However, why would you try a case involving 1 victim first instead of 4 victims?
Well, because another reason why is because what if the prosecutor loses a case where he just tries it against one of the victims, right? Loses that case, he still has a chance at 4 other cases to get a conviction against Kellen Winslow, whereas this is an all-or-nothing proposition, 5 victims bundled into one. To me, it's massively risky for what I just said. Because if you're a juror and you're sitting back there and you're saying to yourself, well, I think that the victim who was 17 at the time, she's got a pretty strong case, but gosh, you know what? I don't think I really believe Jane Doe 1 and 2. Those 2 didn't come off credible. You know what? I don't think I believe now the girl that was 17, I don't believe her either. Maybe they're all here and they're just not accounting things correctly. And you know what? I'm just going to find an acquittal. There's a major risk of that happening versus if you had picked one case, focused on the facts. With that just one case, you're not bringing in all these other victims. I mean, let's face it, Seema, you know this. Like, in these sex assault cases, it's really hard for the victims to get up there and testify. I mean, the victims in the Bill Cosby case did a great job, but in other sex assault cases, it doesn't work out that way. And the collateral damage of 1 or 2 victims coming on and not delivering is immense.
Brian, I have some jury selection questions for you now because you are probably an expert there in jury selection. Are you surprised? Actually, tell us about the process because we were a bit confused about the process. Jury selection began on Monday, and as of an hour and a half ago, it still looked like they only had 48 jurors, but people weren't being selected throughout the process. It was just they waited till the end and then everybody got selected. So if you can explain a little bit about what happens there in San Diego County, it would be very helpful.
Sure, no problem. So initially the judge would question all the jurors together, for example, to find out whether any of the jurors have any financial hardship, for example, or whether they have a time commitment to, for example, running a business where they can't be there. So the judge would try to eliminate some of the prospective jurors based on what's called hardship. And then the judge would ask some other preliminary questions. For example, do you have any bias, in favor or against any of the victims or against Winslow? Do you think you can be fair and impartial in this case? If a couple jurors raise their hand and just say, I'll never find against Kellen Winslow because I'm a big diehard fan of his, then the judge can eliminate that juror as well for cause. Then after that, then each attorney, the prosecutor and then one of the attorneys for the defense can then ask questions generally of the remaining jurors, and then based on those answers, then ask questions specifically of each of the jurors to gather as much information as possible to create what we call a challenge for cause. So good lawyers out here are gathering information to try to get some data that would show that one of the jurors might be biased in favor of prosecution or defense. Now, what we did in the Dalia DiPolito trial, which I hope defense counsel did here, and the prosecutor, if you find a juror, for example, that you think should be removed for what's called cause because they have a bias, what you should then ask for is what's called individual voir dire. And the best lawyers know how to do that. Then you ask the judge to ask all other jurors to leave and then just have that one juror there. And then the lawyer can have a one-on-one with that juror to find out whether he or she really has bias. And that helps you then eliminate the juror for cause. We did that really effectively in the Dalia DiPolito case. We were able to eliminate many jurors because of the pretrial publicity, for example. I mean, this is big time here in San Diego. So that's another important component of jury selection. So that's how it works, and it sounds like the process went effectively because it took, about a week to get a jury in a high-profile case. That's pretty good.
Brian, are you surprised that the defense only used 8 of their 20 challenges and the prosecution only used 4 of their 20 challenges?
I am surprised by that. I guess it's based on the information that they were learning from the jurors. For example, the pretrial publicity would be the most important question I'm going to ask all these jurors. And you've got to dig really deep, Seema. You've got to ask. For example, in Dalia's case, what newspapers were you reading? We had a list of all all the media outlets who were covering Dahlia's case, and we would ask specific questions. Have you read this newspaper? Have you read that paper? Have you watched this TV show? If any of those answers are yes, then we're going to try to knock that juror off with a peremptory challenge. So given the high-profile nature of this case, and given the potential for bias based on that, I'm surprised that more peremptories were not used.
Exactly. Okay, let's bring in criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool, still in front of the courthouse in San Diego. Brian, thanks for sticking with us here.
Sure, my pleasure, Seema.
Are you surprised that we have an entirely white jury, 12 jurors, four alternates? You're there, you're in the community. Is this surprising to you?
Not at all. We're at a courthouse in a town called Vista, California. It's northern San Diego. It's not even that far from towns like Oceanside, and then you drive a little bit further north and you reach what's called South Orange County in California, and these areas are predominantly white. So this is not unexpected, and it is a plus for the prosecution for sure.
Okay, so what effect is it going to have on the accused, Kellen Winslow II?
Well, I mean, let's face it, in a case where you have an African-American athlete, in any cases where you have a minority that's on trial in a criminal case, the lawyers for that defendant are going to want to try to have jurors that are in their same ethnicity. Why? Because they can better relate to not only who they are, but potentially their upbringing, possibly some of the struggles that African Americans face when growing up. It would humanize things for the defendant to have jurors that can relate to their ethnicity and their race, and that does give an upper hand to the prosecution. That said, though, I mean, you've got a lot of guys on the jury. I'm a diehard sports fan. I know Kellen Winslow. I know his father. So you know, the good news for Winslow is if some of these men on the jury are sports fanatics, let's face it, much like cases that I've seen in Los Angeles County where you're dealing with celebrities, jurors do have a propensity of leaning toward the celebrity because they feel like they already know the defendant before they even get into the courtroom and hear the evidence.
Excellent point, Brian. So let's get into that. Tell me about Kellen Winslow Sr. I've heard that he's a hometown hero there. He's absolutely worshipped in the community. So white versus black versus brown may not be as significant in this trial.
No, it won't be. Exactly. I mean, Kellen Winslow's dad was a superstar in football, and I don't want to give away my age, but I still knew about Kellen Winslow's dad. I'm a diehard Steelers fan. I grew up near Pittsburgh, and yet I still know a lot about not only Kellen Winslow, but his dad. So the secret for defense in this case is they have got to bring that into play. They've got to talk about the family, the legacy that not only Kellen Winslow Jr., but his father has left. And they also have to bring in some of Kellen Winslow's relatives. And that raises the million-dollar question, which you're probably going to be asking some of your guests next week, which is, will Kellen Winslow testify in this trial? To me, that's a fascinating question. And when you're dealing with a sexual assault case where the core issue in most of these charges, with 3 of the victims at least, with forcible rape is, did they consent? Well, assuming 3 victims get up there and say, I did not consent, how does Kellen Winslow raise a defense of consent without him getting up on the stand and talking about this? And in so doing, he can also talk about you know, what a good person he is, his work ethic, what he's done in the community, things like that. So that's going to be an interesting decision for defense counsel.
Brian, I'm going to probably be asking you that next week because I want you to come back and break this all down with me. And maybe you can stick around a little longer, but I do appreciate your time, Brian.
Sure.